this evening comes from chapter 6 of the book of Genesis. When men began to increase on earth and daughters were born to them, the divine beings saw how beautiful the daughters of men were, and took wives from among those that pleased them. The Lord said, "My breath shall not abide in man forever, since he too is flesh. Let the days allowed him be 120 years. It was then and later too that the Nephilim appeared on earth, when the divine beings cohabited with the daughters of men who bore them offspring. They were the heroes of old, the men of renown." What in the world? First few lines of chapter 6. Right at the end of the first parasha of the Torah, goes on a couple sentences later to introduce this guy Noah, who you probably know a lot more about. But who are these Elohim, these divine beings? Who are the Nephilim, these ones that are the people of renown? And what are they doing with our women? Wait a minute. We only now are having daughters? This is already like 10 generations in from Adam and Chava. How did we get 10 generations along if there haven't been daughters born to humanity up till this point? It's at this point that many people with the best of intentions who start off the new year trying to read from the Tanakh stop. Because they come across something that seems not just confusing, but almost not Jewish, almost foreign. I mean, really, the divine beings are coming down for our women? Isn't that like something out of science fiction, fantasy, or at the very least another religious tradition? We don't really go in for the whole angels having sex with humans kind of thing, do we? And the Nephilim, which is the translator's way of hiding what is often used in other translations, giants, where are these giants? Or we could go the other route and say that Nephilim comes from the word for nafal, which means to fall, and therefore these are the fallen ones, which has been picked up and run with by some other religions all the way past the 100-yard line to make a lot of pop culture. It doesn't really feel at home here, does it? And that turns people off, or it turns them on to the wrong idea. So this is the great paradox of Bible study, is that when people come across parts that they don't recognize, they either say, "This is stupid," and shut the book, or they say, "This is juicy," and obsess over it, often leading to incorrect conclusions. So I'd like to show you how our tradition handles this section of the Tanakh. Again, if you want to read along, you can look at chapter 6. It's in your Tanakh. We don't hide it. And as much as I dislike this translation, we'll be sort of working with it. So the first thing, let's talk about these Nephilim, these fallen ones, or giants as they are referred to in other parts of the Bible. There are giants and there are giants. If I were to tell you that Babe Ruth was a giant of his time, would you ask me how tall he was? No. We've seen pictures, and I'm not saying he was short, but he would not have been comfortable on an NBA basketball court today. He would not have been able to do much. So what do we mean when we say he was a giant? Larger than life. He was somebody that was able to accomplish amazing things within fields that were valued by the community at the time. But the problem here is that the people who were these anakim, these giants, were not of good moral character. How do we know they're not of good moral character? Well, they're going around taking people's wives. But why do we know that they are still these giants? Because these were what were considered heroes in their generation. What the Torah is trying to tell us here, and indeed is setting us up for with the story of the flood, is that not only were people behaving badly, but people were behaving badly and being rewarded for it. And it is not enough to just simply say, a lot of people were committing crimes back then. People commit crimes today. The difference is I hope, that in their day, those who committed the grandest crimes, or at least had the muscle to back it up, were heralded as heroes. Now that may sound like a bit of a stretch, but has anybody here ever read Greek or Roman mythology? Has anybody ever read Babylonian or Akkadian or any of the other mythology of the ancient Near East? Gilgamesh was not a nice guy, right? Theseus, Hercules, Perseus, these were not David, with all of his flaws, would not even be in the same league as a committer of crimes compared to the heroes of many of the other ancient worlds. And that is something that we have to hold as being a very important way of understanding the description in this part of chapter 6. That these people who are fallen from the right path, and they are pulling everyone else down with them. These are people who are being heralded for their strength, but they use their strength to dominate and exploit others. And this is a warning to the generation who first received the Torah, as well as to us, that when you see somebody with the power and strength to do what they want, and what they want is wrong, you may be powerless to stop them. Unfortunately, that has been the case in many points in history. But you are not powerless to condemn them. You are not powerless to recognize that what they are doing is wrong, and to call what is wrong, wrong, and to refrain from idolizing, from hero worshiping people that are living larger than life. It is tempting, as the mythology of the other ancient worlds cultures show, to want to believe that if I had power, I too would be a complete terrible person. Wouldn't that be great for me? It is tempting to want to be that way, to imagine that if I had power, I too could dominate my surroundings, I could crush my enemies, I could take whomever I wished. That is the power fantasy of many people throughout history. And the Torah is telling us right here in the very beginning, no, this is not what makes a person a hero. Okay, so they're not physical giants, they're not striding the earth, 50 feet up or anything like that. All right. But what do we do about that first section, the Elohim, that are taking the women that they find pretty to start having kids with? Now, the word Elohim usually means God, right? As in Elohim, right? You'll probably know it better in like Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu, which is the construction of the word Elohim as well as ours, and combined together the way Hebrew does. So it's Elohim Shelanu, our God. But for those of you that remember back to your Hebrew days, you'll know that the im ending signifies the plural, right? Elohim. If I have one Talmid, if I have one student, it's Talmid. If I have two, it's Talmidim. It becomes a plural. There are other plural endings, but im is one of the most common. So Elohim could mean God, as in the God. Indeed, that's how it works in most Jewish prayers. Or it could mean Elohim, meaning those gods, in English probably rendered with a lowercase g. Or it could just mean things that are God-like, meaning supernatural beings, which is the prerogative of this translator, to go down that route. It is not, however, the traditional rendering of the word Elohim, because we have not exhausted its definitional phrases. You all know what a dictionary is, and you all know if you look up a word in the dictionary, there's going to be like a little 1, and it'll have the first definition, and then a little 2, and it'll have a second definition, and then maybe a 3 or a 4 or a 5, and some words have pages and pages of different definitions. Elohim does as well. The word doesn't only mean supernatural entity. The word simply means powerful, the high and mighty. Well, there are supernatural high and mighty, both the real God as well as things that people believe exist in the supernatural realm of high and mighty. But there are also human high and mighty people. And indeed, the word Elohim is used for them in the rest of the Torah as well as in the rest of the Tanakh for different occasions. It's not the most common usage of the word, but it is there and undeniably pointing towards human beings. So why would we believe here that these Elohim are somehow divine creatures, supernatural entities that are after our women? It is more plausible, says our tradition, that these are the people who are often exploiting their power when it comes to the people around them. The high and mighty of the ancient society. The kings, the lords, the bandits who had enough power and might behind them, the chieftains, they took what they wanted. They did what they wanted. If they saw somebody that they thought was attractive, she was added to the collection. What were you going to do? Stop it? And what the Torah is trying to say here, again, to presage what is going to come with the flood in chapter 7, is that these were the people who had the power. These were the people who were in positions of authority and leadership. These were the people who were making decisions on behalf of the whole community. And this is what they were doing. This was how they lived. This was the justice they gave to their communities. This were the laws they gave. This is laying the foundation of why the flood is about to break. That the people who had either the fame or the power were all engaged in absolutely despicable behavior that was corrupting the society around them. And as such, the society around them needed a reboot. It needed a reset. It needed what we're going to call the flood. And out of that, we would start again. Not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but with the opportunity at least to develop different types of cultures, to not have a monoculture that is entirely enwrapped in the hero worship of what is foul and what is base. Yes, there will still be some who will do that, but we will not all be in that boat. Shabbat Shalom.